What is marriage? What is it? What is marriage? What does it mean to be married? And we're going to talk about three different things, at least one of which I don't think most people include in their definition of marriage. We are living in a world of two marriages. When you watch the news, we're talking about two different kinds of marriage. When we listen to political arguments between groups, there are two different kinds of marriage that are being talked about. One of them, and there are no formal names, I'm going to call one of them governmental marriage. Like marriage as recognized by the government, okay? And marriage is recognized by the government is this. It's an agreement between two people that affects their taxes, their health care, and property ownership. That's pretty much what that means. When a government recognizes an agreement between two people as it affects taxes, health care, and property ownership. That's pretty much what, if you're voting on marriage and that kind of thing, typically as it applies to the way the government views marriage, that's really pretty much what they're talking about most of the time. It's why so often Christian groups and governmental groups kind of argue over this topic because we're talking about two different definitions to the same word, okay? Governmental marriage is those three things. There are probably other things, but think about it. When a couple goes through a divorce, which is a governmental issue where they're having to go to a court system and be separated, the issues are taxes, health care, property ownership. That's really, might include children oversight in that as well. Who gets the kids, who gets to keep the kids, how often do you get to see the kids, that kind of thing. So that ultimately is what the government would view as marriage. But then spiritual marriage, what we learn about in the Bible and what we celebrate in the church and what we do in our weddings and things like that. Spiritual marriage is when God binds a committed man and a committed woman together with a spiritual covenant to express love, give pleasure without shame, and illustrate the gospel. Those are kind of the three big points that we're going to look at today. To express love, to give pleasure without shame, and to illustrate the gospel. Those are the three issues that we see biblically define spiritual marriage or marriage that God is involved in, okay? So just please understand that as you're navigating those topics and two different groups of people are arguing about who can be married and what is marriage and different things, oftentimes we're really using the same word to mean completely two different things. And so we want to make sure that as Christ followers, we are living out in our own wedding, in our own marriage, in our own relationship, a spiritual marriage and not just a limited governmental marriage. We want to live in a place where God has bound two people together. And those two people are a committed man, a committed woman, who with the connection of a spiritual covenant, which basically, a spiritual covenant, we could spend a lot of time talking about that, but it's the idea where God gets involved in our commitments. God gets involved in our commitments, and now, normally, like if I make a commitment to Brother Roger, we shake hands and say, I'm going to give you $100 for that thing, and he says, he shakes my hand, and we have an agreement, right? And then if some reason, if I don't follow through with my end of that agreement, that's kind of between us. Like he now has reason to have concern for me, or he can take back the thing I bought, or whatever. That's between those two men. A covenant, a spiritual covenant, is when a committed man takes the hand of a committed woman, and God puts His hand on their hands. And now it's not just two people who are committed; it's three. You understand what I'm saying? Well, there's a third. The Lord is involved in that connection, in that commitment, and He places His blessing on that relationship, and His intention is to work through that relationship to do three things, and probably more than three things, but the three things we're going to talk about today is to express love, give pleasure without shame, and illustrate the gospel.